Yeah, so let's create a folder here. We'll call it, of course, payload, right? Sure, I'll switch my camera off. Sure. So now in here, again, I'm gonna create a readme.md file. And happy, let's do a quick recap of whatever we have learned last session. Right. So we had a discussion that JavaScript by default is what kind of language? Is it synchronous or asynchronous? By default, asynchronous is JavaScript, yes, synchronous. It's synchronous, right? JS is by default synchronous, right? So what does synchronous means? That let's say I have a function 1, I have a function 2, and I have a function 3, right? If I'm calling 1 like this, if I'm calling 2 like this, and if I'm calling 3 like this, line by line, first function 1 will execute, then second function will execute, and third function will execute. Is that how things run in our normal JavaScript? Right? But let's say ki one of these functions are asynchronous, right? So let's say ki this second is async function, and in this async function, given that any async function use kar rahe ho, let's say in here I'm using set timeout to make this thing async, right? Set timeout kya kya le raha tha? It was taking 2 parameters, right? I would rather take this out, right? 2 parameters leta tha. First one was the function's name, and second one was the delay. Was the delay in milliseconds? Delay jo tha, was it in milliseconds? Right? So now how will this file or how will these functions execute? First will we execute 1, then we'll execute 3, and finally we'll execute 2. Right? So this is an example of asynchronous JavaScript. Take under that we have seen set timeout, set interval, and all that stuff. फिर बात आती है कि given that there were two different problems, right? एक problem था कि for making a function asynchronous, we are using set timeout and set interval, right? So rather हमें क्या है, in here we have to know the delay, right? So basically what we are trying to instigate in our set timeout is कि हमें delay पता होना चाहिए how much the like database is going to delay the delivery of data. But is it something that we can predict over entire systems in entire world? Predict कर सकते हैं a universal time? No, right? Because for some people things might load in 5 seconds. For some people things might take 50 seconds. For some people it might take 1 second. Right? So there's a difference between time. Right? So to fix that, rather than going for delay, we went for something which was called promises. Right? Now, promises, delay chahta hai? Does it asks for delay? Promises? No. Right? It relies on state principle. Right? To states pe rely karta hai. Now, how many states do we have in promises? Promises mein kitne states hote hain? If you guys remember, 3 states. 3 states. Either the promise was resolved, either the promise was rejected, or third one, the promise is still going, right? Promise abhi pending, right? So let's assume ki if I tell you guys how to access, let's say ki I have a function which is called access, right? और इस function में क्या होता है? Basically we get data from database. How are we doing this? That's not a concern for now. अभी के लिए वो जानने की जरूरत नहीं है, but just assume कि there is a function जिसका नाम है access and it gets data from database, right? So now let's say कि if our file is loading, file load हो रहा है, so if this thing takes 3 seconds, what will be the state of promise? If it takes 3 seconds, at 1 second of website loading, क्या होगा still? Will it be pending? Will it be pending at 1 second of loading? 2 seconds, what will it be? 2 seconds. पेज को लोड होने के बाद स्टिल पेंडिंग, स्टिल पेंडिंग, स्टिल पेंडिंग. 3 सेकेंड्स पे क्या होगा? 3 सेकेंड्स पे क्या होगा? Now this thing will be resolved, right? So third second पे it will be resolved, or there is a possibility that database is not working or the link is broken or something. It may be resolved or it may be reject. ये दो केस होते. right? So what was the state and how are they coming in use, वो clear है? कैसे states use हो रहे? Everyone? ठीक, next बात आती है, how do we actually write or apply a promise, right? So let's say if I have a promise.html file, and in here, what we're going to do is we're going to just write a script file. And यहाँ पे I'll write my promise. Now again, variable है, the name can be anything. What was the syntax? Do you guys remember the syntax? So basically हम क्या लिखते हैं? We write new, it's a keyword, and then we write promise with a capital P, right? So promise. Take now this promise keyword is again a method and it takes one parameter. Basically, it takes a callback function, right? So I'm gonna pass a callback function, and this callback function takes two parameters, arguments. What was those two things? What was those two parameters? Resolve and reject, right? So we have resolve and we have reject. Take how does the promise know when to reject it when time limit is not given? Okay, we'll take that case. Okay, we'll take that case. All right. So just for now, tell me if the syntax is clear that this thing is a promise. Everyone, right? So if I go and write a console.log of my promise, what's gonna happen? What am I gonna get in output? Output में क्या मिलना? Like what data type am I gonna get? Just इतना बता. Am I gonna get an object? Promise object मिलने वाला है मेरे को. Everyone. And given that we are not using resolve or reject at all, its status is pending. Right? So let's do one thing. Let's go in here and यहाँ पे we'll write a set timeout. Right? And what this set timeout is gonna do is we're gonna write a function in it. So we are let's do a set timeout of 2 milliseconds, and then what we'll do is we'll basically return resolve. Right? So resolve के साथ we'll say कि promise completed. Right? So basically we are taking a asynchronous program inside promise, right? Now we don't have to tell promise ki what kind of delay are we gonna get from your asynchronous code, but finally promise is gonna return either 3 of the states, right? So या तो वो pending return करेगा, either it's gonna return resolve or it's gonna return reject, right? So let's go and see what happens if I refresh, right? So refresh pe the promise is pending, right? And as soon as the 2 second completes, let's do one thing. Like, but फिर क्या होगा ना कि we'll have to accept resolve, right? चलो ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे एक और छोटी सी चीज. So for now we are getting the promise and we are printing the state of promise as it is, right? The very first time when promise had some value, we were printing it and it was pending by default, right? There was a delay of 2 seconds, right? अभी क्या होगा? Now finally we are returning a resolve from it, right? My promise से हम लोग एक resolve return कर रहे हैं. Now whenever you resolve or reject, you deal with it in cases of dot then and dot catch, right? So if a promise is resolved, right, it's handled handled by dot this, and if a promise is rejected, it's handled by dot catch, right? So abhi ye kya hai? Now let's say if I'm taking this my promise, right? And after this, after running this, what I want to do is I want to attach a dot then, right? I'm expecting that this thing is getting resolved. So I'll go in here I'll go in a function and I'll accept the value, right? We will usually write res or result. And in here, I'll go and print res. Take, so again, if we wait for 2 seconds, you guys will see कि once the promise is done running, na, 2 seconds बाद, it's taking this resolve and it's printing promise complete. Tick. So dot then is used when you resolve a promise, right? But let's say कि you rejected that promise, right? अगर promise reject हो गया, then will this piece of code run? It won't run, right? So now you'll have to attach one more condition, just like if and else, which will say catch, right? Catch me, yeah. This, yeah, correct. Here, this will be dot 10, correct. And then we'll have a catch. And in here, again, we'll write a function, which will again accept a res, or here you can write error. And this will just print console.log, whatever error or like whatever you are getting in the here, right? यहाँ पे resolve में आपने जो भी pass किया है, we're gonna access it here and we'll print it here. Whatever you have passed in rejected will go here and we'll print, right? So now, for now, the promise is completed. So we are printing resolve, right? Let's do one thing. Let's create a variable in here. Let flag equals to true. And what we can do is we can go with a set interval, right? And यहाँ पे हर 2 seconds पे what we are gonna do is we're gonna say if flag is true, right? If flag is true, what we want to do is we want to make flag false. Else, हम क्या कर रहे हैं अपने flag को again turn कर रहे हैं true, right? And once this happens, again यहाँ पे I'll write if flag is true, right? But this won't work, right? क्योंकि the flag will be true. We're gonna enter set interval and then we're gonna run this piece of code. ठीक है, not a good example. चलो going. So I'll show it here itself then. So let's say if I write reject here with some error, so where are we going to print? Dot then or dot catch me? Right, so we'll be printing this in dot catch. Right, so why wouldn't line 26 run first? Line 26, this one. Or are you asking about this thing, this console? Okay, tell me, you guys tell me only. If I uncomment this console statement, what am I going to print? अगर मैं uncomment करता हूँ, I'm going to print that promise object. What will be the state? State क्या होगा? Pending. Why? Because here we are defining a new promise, right? Now this entire thing is what? It's a promise, right? Finally, it's returning a promise. But the code which is written inside this promise के अंदर जो code लिखा है, it has a certain delay in it, right? So isn't this asynchronous code? Asynchronous code है. So we are going to skip this code for now and we're going to go and print the next synchronous code, which is this console statement. So if I run this console statement, na, by default, वो pending है, right? But once we are taking that promise and we are dealing with it in case it is resolved or rejected, we are printing suitable solutions. Clear? So pending URI, is that clear? Right? But let's say कि if I again let me just comment this one out. इसको मैं comment out कर देता हूँ. If I immediately reject it, right? इसको मैं जाके rather than adding a delay, adding an asynchronous code, I go and immediately reject it. What am I gonna get now? If I uncomment this console, promise का state क्या आने वाला? Right? So if I go and check my console now, it will say rejected directly. Why? Because there is no asynchronous code. By default, first this line is running, then this line is running. But जैसे ही you make this thing asynchronous, what happens? It waits, it rejects it, and then it prints. Take, you can explain line number 27 and 30 again. 27 and 30. I will. But is this part clear कि why initially if we are adding a asynchronous code, pending आ रहा था, but जैसे ही we were writing a synchronous kind of code, it was getting resolved. Dot समझ नहीं आया? I'll clear it. ठीक, चलो. So now again, if a promise is resolved, right? अगर promise resolved हो गया, you'll go for dot then वाला method. But if a promise is rejected, you will go for dot catch. But we are never sure कि ये promise resolve होगा या reject होगा. So we go and write both of these conditions. ठीक, ठीक है? अभी clear है everyone? Right? All right. Line number 27 and 31 async also. 27, I think you're asking about dot then and dot catch, right? So this should not be async, right? But if we have provided a async code inside my promise, so whatever touches this code ना, कोई भी code जो इस code से related है, it will become asynchronous, right? So am I chaining methods to this my promise function, my promise object? Am I chaining dot then and dot catch method? So by default, what kind of code will it be? Asynchronous, right? रेस्ट की वैल्यू सेम होगी तो स्टेट के होने से क्या फर्क पड़ता है? फर्क ये पड़ता है कि योर you can get this piece of code in interview and you guys might be asked that what this console will print. Now some of you guys will go and say the state will be rejected in line number 23, but that's not true, right? Why is it not true? Because in line number 23, this is a synchronous code, right? Again, let's do one thing. Let's take this thing here, right? And let's quickly walk through. Take the ये रहा code. I hope this is visible, right? Now, we are gonna have something which is called call stack here. Call stack याद है सबको? Call stack. You guys remember, right? Then what was this thing where asynchronous code was going? What was this thing? Web API. Web API, right? And then we had this thing. What was this called? Callback queue. Callback queue, right? And finally, there was this rotating circle, जो कि rotate कर रहा था, and it was sending things from call stack to web API and web API to callback queue and henceforth. What was this thing called? Event loop, right? ठीक है. So let's do one thing. Let's start with this piece of code, right? So where is this thing gonna go? Is it gonna go inside call stack yet? Right? ये सिर्फ एक ऑब्जेक्ट है. It's just a variable. For now इसके अंदर कोई फंक्शन नहीं है. Right? Now we are entering this function. सबसे पहले ये वाला function we are gonna get. So we're gonna go in here and here we're gonna put this my promise object in it. Right? It's an object. We are not using any methods of this object. Just पूरा का पूरा object we are sending. Right? Because console statement is there. Now, does this my promise runs? Have we attached a parenthesis to it? Are we calling it? No. So will anything else enter inside call stack for this line? No. Right? So abhi kya hoga? We're gonna just take this thing and this will come out. Out aane ke baad, we'll just print whatever we have in this, right? So for now, given that the function is not running at all, function run nahi hua, just the by default promise ka state return kiya, and what's the by default state? It was pending, right? So we have printed pending. ठीक, उसके बाद आया next step. So I'll have to erase the, oh wait, ये पूरा Okay, let me just erase this and this. Take and maybe this. Chalo. So next step will be entering this my promise dot then, and then the dot then may we have added a parenthesis. So are we calling this dot then? Dot then को call कर रहे हैं, right? 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 When do we call a function? As soon as we check the function and we add a parenthesis to it, right? Even though that function is of an object, right? तो object के अंदर function को क्या बोलते हैं? What is the overall term for these kinds of things? Was it methods? Object methods, right? तो इसी तरीके से promise object में we have two methods, like we have three methods in methods multiple है. Resolve and reject करने के लिए we have dot then and dot catch, right? Basically two methods. One is dot then and one is dot catch, right? So अब क्या होगा? Now we are gonna go and we are gonna put dot then in here, right? अभी क्या होगा? This promise function will be called because उसका एक method is being called, right? So now we are gonna run this piece of code. Take this piece of code has set interval in it. So will it enter call stack? Of course it will enter call stack. So set interval will enter call stack, but instantly will it send somewhere else? कहीं और भेज दिया जाएगा. Call stack से instantly will it send somewhere else? Web API में, so we're gonna just take this and we're gonna throw it in here, right? कब तक रहेगा यहाँ पे? Set interval कब तक रहेगा in your web APIs? Up until the delay ends. Up until the delay ends. Delay is of 2 seconds, right? जैसे ही delay is done, it will be sent to your callback queue, right? And then finally here, right? But finally, is it returning reject? Right? तो अभी क्या होगा? Now rather than going for a dot then, we'll enter the dot catch वाला block and we'll print whatever we have sent in reject, right? तो बस यही हो रहा है, nothing else is clear. Will then and catch wait for resolve and reject value? Yes, it will actually wait, right? We're just running this promise. It will wait for whatever result we are gonna get out of this set interval or set timeout, and finally we are gonna print whatever result we were getting. Clear? Clear? Right? So again, guys, method chaining yaad hai na? Right? Right? So this my promise to method hai, it is calling another function which was reject ya resolve. Right? So this dot then is acting on this function ka output. Take, right? So that's how it works. It's like a if else condition. It won't go anywhere. Like pura ka pura function will be sent in here, right? With your set time. And up until that resolves, yeah, rejects, you're gonna keep it there. Right? But again, you don't have to always think in this terms when you're dealing with promises. All you have to understand is that if your promise is doing a reject, you're gonna enter which code block? Dot then or dot catch? Dot catch, right? And if it resolves, you will enter dot. What is res? Please tell. Res is nothing. It's just a parameter that we are going to get here, right? So if you are rejecting, you are passing some value in it, right? So we're just accepting that value and printing it. This can have any name. You guys remember parameters can have any name. So any name can be here and you can just use this. Yahi milega and you can put it here. ठीक. रियल लाइफ में कहाँ यूज होता है प्रॉमिस? जस्ट विल शो यू दैट. पहले ये बताओ, ये क्लियर है? What is promise and how you can deal with it? ठीक. But here state is pending. Why pending? इसलिए भाई क्योंकि देखो यहाँ पे, क्योंकि we haven't resolved or rejected the promise yet. Right, in line number 23 we are dealing with it when we are calling that my promise dot then या dot catch वाला method. right? Right? So maybe if I go in here and maybe if I try to print my promise again, although this is not recommended, because this might give some unwanted result. Let's see if we are printing something. Set timeout. And we go in here and again print my promise. Let's see. So, so it's printing some error, and after that, after 2 seconds of delay, it's printing the promise ka now current state, which is rejected, right? With a promise result of something. Clear? वहीं पे if I resolve this, you'll see resolve wala section. Here you will see, right? So after 2 seconds, it's fulfilled. I hope that clears it. अगर डॉट कैच यूज नहीं करेंगे, if you're not using dot catch ना, then you won't be able to deal with reject, right? So either if you are dealing with resolve, you'll use dot, then if you are dealing with reject, you will use dot catch. There's one more condition which is called finally, right? ये both condition में run करता है. It's gonna run in dot then वाला condition and dot catch also, right? So you can print, if you want print something when both resolve promise either resolves or reject, you can go with dot finally. Clear? But the important ones are these two. Okay, that's all with promise, nothing else. Right now, how is it used real world में क्या है, we'll discuss it. ठीक, चलो. So now next stop will be fetch. Right, so fetch will be your when use dot finally. Dot finally will be used whenever like देखो यहाँ. So again, dot finally, if I write in here, if I write a function, now this will run in both cases. Resolve भी होगा तब भी dot finally will run, reject भी होगा तब भी it will run. So if I prints both times, right? So even if it will resolve or reject, it's gonna print, right? So for now I've resolved it, so it's gonna print, and if I go for reject, it's still print. Right? It still prints in both cases, right? So let's say, assume if you have something that you want to send in both cases, dot then and dot catch, you can use dot find. Okay, now let's talk about fetch. Okay, so again, just like promises and all, fetch is a keyword that you use in JavaScript. It's a method and you call it like this, right? Abhi, what fetch takes is it takes a URL, right? So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna store it in a variable called store, and I'm gonna call this fetch, right? So this is a function. If I go in here and if I do a store, let's see what we are actually getting. Mil kya raha hai hame output. So let me just this, and if I refresh it, so we're getting a promise which says rejected, right? And the result is type error, failed to execute fetch on window, right? So the issue that it is giving us is that argument is required, right? So basically fetch ko run karne ke liye we need an argument, right? So that argument is gonna be your URL of any website, of your database, right? So we'll have to discuss around that also. So basically this is fetch returns promise, right? So I hope you guys are getting there is a function that is called fetch, which is written by JavaScript, and it is returning new promise, something like this, right? In hindsight, it's already pre-written. This makes sense? How we are getting fetch and fetch is accepting something and we're getting promise in return. Right? So now let's see what URL goes in here, right? So uske liye we'll have to understand how our backend and front-end system works, right? So again, I'm going to draw that diagram that we usually draw, right? Ye two boxes honge. You have your front-end and you have your backend, right? Now, as we discussed, we need to send data from front end to back end to update our back end, and we need to send data from back end to front end to update our front end, राइट. सो बेसिकली डेटा का आदान प्रदान दोनों तरफ हो रहा है. वी आर सेंडिंग एंड रिसीविंग डेटा फ्रॉम बैक एंड टू फ्रंट एंड फ्रंट एंड टू बैक. राइट. नाउ there is something which has to act as a middleman between these two. What is that called? Given that this is a software and this is also backend is also a software. Do we need an interface in between? एक interface चाहिए. Interface चाहिए. Right. So basically these interfaces are called, if you guys, okay, I think I've written here. So I'm gonna just create an arrow and I'll type it here. This interface is nothing but your API. Right. Application programming interface. दोनों application के बीच में program जो कर रहा है वो interface. Right. Now this thing can be multiple of things, like it can be XHR and all, but हम कौन सा use करेंगे? We are going to use a API which is called fetch. So we're going to use a API which is called fetch. Right. Abhi this fetch accepts a URL. Right. It accepts a URL. Right. Now why does it need URL? So when backend systems are created, na, they are created based on two important things. एक होता है your models and एक होता है your schema. Right. That's not terribly important. Finally, जब एक backend create हो जाता है ना, it creates routes. Do you guys know about routes? Any idea? If no, let's say again we are visiting Flipkart. Right. तो ये जो www.flipkart.com है ना, this is a domain. Right. But if I click on some things, will I be adding something in this URL only? Right. This will be a parent URL, but if I click on, let's say TV, right? So it's going to show me TV, but something will be added in there, right? You see, it has added computers. Then inside that computer, it has added monitor. Then inside that monitor, it has attached an ID, a specific ID for these Dell ke laptops. Right. So these are your routes or endpoints or URLs and all, whatever you want to say. Right. But ये जो होते हैं ना, ये specific होते हैं. Right. These can be specific as to you want to visit product page, you're gonna visit card page. Like you can say that these things are page specific. Page specific. Right. So basically overall आप क्या चाहते हो? You want to get the data of everything from database. Right. So the database is gonna be a long JSON file जिसमें there is gonna be a DB. Right. Overall, just giving you guys a brief. And इस DB के अंदर you are gonna have multiple small like this DB, and in this DB you're gonna have multiple small objects, right? So let's say you have your product page. This thing will be again an array of multiple different product objects, right? So again, in terms of route, if you want to access the route, what you will do is you will write your domain, whatever domain you are accessing your database from, you'll write DB, and us DB के अंदर you are accepting product. So URL gets created like this, right? And these URLs are something that we send in fetch. Okay, so overall, again, you guys don't have to exactly remember about these things, but a brief दिया कि why do we need URLs overall, right? But finally, you'll have a URL and you can directly use. Clear? अभी वो URL find कैसे करेंगे? So we have multiple dummy APIs that are hosted on your like websites and all. So one of these are like JSON placeholder, right? So this website, let's say if I click on it. So it's a free, fake, and reliable API for testing, right? So what this does is, let's say if I visit this, right? If I visit jsonplaceholder.com, if I write this, okay, not this, and if I attach a slash to dos in it, right? So you see, it has an array and uske andar it has objects, right? So basically JSON format mein data is stored in this URL or this route. Clear? Clear? उसी तरीके से there are multiple different APIs, right? So there are like a fake store and all, right? So if I click on fake store API, you'll see if I go on docs, you'll see कि we have like these URLs, right? तो ये दिखा रहा है every API has a different way of creating routes and all. So whenever you're visiting a API, in future, you're gonna go and read the documentations of these API. Every API has a documentation, you can go and read it, right? So how do we use it? Here it says you'll have to write fetch, and then inside brackets, if you wanna get not this, if you wanna get all the products, आपको क्या करना है? You have to type this URL, right? So shall we try this? Shall we try this fetching things? Chalo, try it. So we'll visit back here, and now we're gonna create a file which is gonna be called fetch.html. यहाँ पे we're gonna write a script, and यहाँ पे let's go and write let data equals to fetch. Then we have to write a bracket, and bracket में क्या जाएगा? The URL, right? So let's use this URL, right? So ये वाला URL let's go and use, or rather let's go for placeholder वाला. Yeah, because these things as images also. So now we'll put the URL in, right? अभी क्या है? The URL should be in string format, right? तो इसको take करेंगे and we'll create a string of, right? So ठीक है, we have created a fetch, and fetch में we are getting things from URL. Now let's go and do a console.log data. So given that हम ये वाला URL से fetch कर रहे हैं data, what are we expecting? We're expecting that if I visit that URL, we're getting this JSON data. So we're expecting कि console में we might get that JSON data. At least expectation है. No, yes, no, okay. So let's go and see what we are actually getting. Take, let's go and see कि हमें console में मिल क्या है. So now if I disrupt the code and go live, let's run our inspect. ठीक है, तो we are getting promise which is said to be fulfilled and it has a certain response, right? तो basically हमने fetch किया, हमने URL correct दिया, so the promise was fulfilled, right? Let's say if we mess up the URL, URL क्या है? It's pending, right? Finally ये fulfilled आ रहा है, but it's fulfilled in a fashion of 404 not found. तो इसके response में we are not gonna get anything, ठीक? क्योंकि status is 404. Anyways, let's fix the URL and let's go and fetch again. ठीक, so now if I click on it again, it's fulfilled. अगर response जाके check करें, तो the status is 200, right? So here a small thing, status codes, right? Status codes, you guys will go and search about it in MDN. For now, if you have status code between 200 and 300, it means that a server is working properly. Take for now, if it's greater than 400, server or URL issues are there. Take ranges are also between 300 and 400. Go find out what happens in those ranges, right? So chalo, back in here, basically we had fetch. Is fetch को whatever this fetch function was returning, we were printing in this console, right? तो fetch क्या return कर रहा है? Was it returning a promise object? Fetch promise object return कर रहा है, right? And we can see that promise object is being fulfilled. It has a response and we know with the status code that response is true, हमें data मिल रहा है. But are we showing any data at all? नहीं. So basically, do we need to process the data? Fulfill हो रहा है promise, and we have seen कि if we go and directly write console.log, it's printing pending. Rather than doing that, once it is resolved, should we go for a dot then? Dot then करना चाहिए, right? ठीक है. So what we are gonna do is we are gonna take our data and इस data में we are gonna apply dot then, right? So let me just comment this one. Abhi in this dot then I'll go and write function and I'm gonna write in parameter. Let's go and print this parameter. Raise को print करते हैं. Let's see what we are getting. So we are getting something else. We are getting the response, right? Abhi in this response we are getting many things in your body and all. The data is stored, right? So why are we not able to see data? There's a very small reason. The reason is that यूजुअली डेटाबेस में जो डेटा स्टोर होता है ना, डीबी में जो डेटा स्टोर होता है, इट्स स्टोर्ड इन जेसन फॉर्म, राइट? एटलीस्ट जब हम फेच से डेटा गेट करते हैं, इट्स गोना बी इन जेसन फॉर्म, right? So when you are sending things on database, which is when you are creating like database, आप जब database create करते हो, which we are not doing yet, आप क्या करते हो? आप अपने normal JavaScript के डेटा को convert करते हो JSON डेटा में. How do we do that? Normal JavaScript के डेटा को convert करना into a JSON format. Do you apply a dot stringify in that data, whatever data you? बट लेट्स से कि आपको वो डेटा यूज करना है अपने लिए, सो शुड बी पास दिस डेटा, इस डेटा को पास करना है, राइट? तो बेसिकली विल हैव टू गो विद json.pass. but there are few more things that happens, like it's only json.pass only, but again it's a bit more complicated, so that is again taken care by JavaScript only. All you have to do is when you get this response na, you have to take this response and you have to apply a small method on it which is called .json, right? ये क्या करेगा? Again this .json is gonna be a promise. It's gonna take your data and it's gonna convert it into a usable stream of string, right? तो basically आपके JSON data को it's converting into a usable data. ठीक? So now, if you guys remember, data was a promise, right? This fetch was a promise, everyone? Yes, no? Promise tha. That promise was returning either resolve or reject. So we went with a dot then. Abhi kya ho raha hai? We are taking this response, we are taking this result, and we are again applying a promise on it. This JSON is a promise. So do we need to write one more dot then to deal with this promise? Yes or no? Yes, right? तो ये जो promise return हो रहा है ना from this dot then we'll have to deal with this also. So हम क्या करेंगे? We are gonna write one more dot then we're gonna write a function and we're gonna write res, right? Now if I go and do a console.log of res, let's see what happens. So if I refresh it, and let me just come this one. Wait, is the URL correct? It is. We'll have to return this, right? So function को return भी करना पड़ेगा, right? So I'm gonna write a res.json. Day1 function URL is not found. Okay, wait. I think the URL is not working. I guess if we get the URL. URL. If I okay, this was correct. We are getting the data. We are doing a dot. Then we're getting response from here. We are taking that response and we are doing a dot JSON, right? This is nothing, guys. It just converts JSON into like dot parse, right? But the function ka naam is JSON, right? So that's why we're writing dot JSON and calling it. And that's nothing. Take the thing is, why use dot then 2 times? Okay, do you guys remember last session? So in here, if you guys remembered, we created 2 functions, right? 2 functions बनाए थे हमने. One was called get data. What was it returning? क्या लिखा है उसमें? You don't have to think about that. Just think what was it returning. क्या रिटर्न कर रहा था? It was returning a promise. What was read data function returning? Again, it was returning a promise. तो हमें क्या करना था? First process was we have to get the data, then we have to read the data, and then finally we have to print the data. Was this the process that we were following? Right? तो अभी हमने क्या किया? First we are getting the data, right? तो we wrote get data dot then. उसके बाद we had to read the data. So we run this function also. Read data वाला. And now to accept this function का promise, we are going with another dot then. Right? So basically यहाँ पे we are doing a fetch, right? This fetch is returning us data, but that data is in JSON format. तो उसको convert करने के लिए into your normal format, we have to run a method which is called .json, and this .json method again returns a promise. तो फिर से उस promise के साथ deal करने के लिए we have to write another dot then. ठीक है? That's why we used two dot. But like we're getting the dot, we are taking the res.json. Okay, res equals to res.json. If I expose now. ठीक है, तो now we are getting the data. चलो कोई, तो पहले तो just forget about how we are getting the data. पहले तो ये बताओ कि why is it clear कि why have we used dot then twice? No. ठीक है, so let me explain that first. Promise then ठीक, यहाँ पे script, right? Now I'm gonna write some dummy functions, right? This one will be get file, right? This one, this function will be unzip file, and this function will be read file, right? Keep in mind everything is returning promise, right? It returns promise, and finally that promise returns data, right? This unzip file returns promise, and this promise returns unzipped data, right? Finally this thing returns promise, and this promise returns opened data. Okay, so I've created 3 dummy functions just for your understanding sake, and every function is returning a promise. ठीक, intention clear है function creation का everyone? These 3, right? They are not exact working function, just dummy functions to make you understand some process. ठीक, चलो अभी what happens when you download a file? Do you run a function? Will you run a function which will be called get file? Right? Let's say you are downloading your code zip. So first thing first, you will run a function. You will click on a button, and that button is gonna run a function which is gonna call get file. ये get file आपको return करेगा data. But is this data wrapped inside a promise? Promise के अंदर wrapped है. So to resolve that promise, you have to go for a dot then. एक dot then के साथ जाना पड़ेगा to resolve it, right? So what we are gonna do is we are gonna go and write a dot then, and this thing basically returns data. अभी हमें data मिल रहा है, but can you directly use a zip file? No. Do you have to unzip it? Right? तो क्या हमें we have to unzip this data file only, or we can unzip anything else and we can get a similar result? We have to specifically unzip this data file. अगर lecture 9 का code download किया है तो you'll have to only unzip lecture 9 का code, or you can unzip any other code. Only lecture 9. So what you will do is you will take this data and you will apply unzip file on this data or not. right? तो inherently overall आप क्या करोगे, you will pick this data, right? And इस पे you will apply unzip file, right? But what you do is data जो है it's promise, right? तो हम क्या करेंगे, rather than using the data here itself, we are gonna call our unzip file function and इसमें we are gonna pass our data. ठीक, अभी this dot then is it gonna return again a promise which has a value of unzipped data? Yes or no? ये जो dot then है, it is calling a function which is called unzipped data, right? So am I gonna return this thing? ये भी promise है, right? यहाँ पे we are getting unzipped data in return, but the catch is that this thing again is a promise, right? So now do we have to deal with this promise also? It's going to give you a response. We have to use a response on this also. तो हम क्या करते हैं, as soon as we get this data ना, we apply one more dot then on it and हम क्या करते हैं, we use this unzip data, right? Now अभी यहाँ पे what's gonna happen is we are gonna get the unzipped data, but do we have to, like, our final process should be read the file या फिर just unzip the file, that's all? Do we have to open that file also, right? तो अभी क्या करेंगे, rather than just directly using this data, I'm going to pass it in a function which is called read file. Now this read file is returning what? It's again returning a promise, right? तो ये वाला जो dot then है, this is also gonna return a promise, right? Which is gonna be read file in return, but this is also a promise. So do we need to write one more dot then to deal with this promise? And now, do we have any other connections? या फिर file open हो गई, you don't have to do anything. Is this done? File open हो गए. Is there any more interrelated functions to run? So finally, we can just print, or like the final open data will be shown. ठीक, ठीक. So is it clear कि why do we need multiple dot thens? If a function is using another function for its help and that another function is again returning a promise, we'll have to write another dot. Clear everyone? Everyone? सबको clear हो गया? Right? तो चलो अभी बात करते हैं कि हम fetch के साथ why do we write two dot thens? क्योंकि you are gonna follow this fetch, those three lines ना, a fetch line, a dot then and another dot then for eternity, right? On promises is just usable there only. उसके अलावा you don't much use promise. So let's assume कि I have a data variable which fetches something and this thing has a URL in it. If I do a console.log data, am I gonna get a promise in return? एक promise return में मिलेगा. So do we need to either resolve or reject this promise? Right? Right? तो हम क्या करेंगे? We'll take this data and we'll apply a dot then on it. Right? We'll write entire thing. We'll write whatever parameter we want to pass. Again, usually we write it as resq because it is a response. You can write it anything. It's a parameter in a function. कुछ भी लिख सकते हैं. I hope that's clear. अब इसके अंदर what we do is whatever we are passing in response we are going to accept it. So if this promise is done, we are going to get the data. But what happens now? Fetch returns data in JSON format. So to use it, what we do is we convert or parse it into usable format. Now there is a function in JavaScript, inbuilt function rather, like your dot splice, dot push, dot pop. एक function है which is called JSON, right? And this function क्या करता है? It takes whatever data and it converts it into usable format, right? But the catch is that this thing returns promise of change. Take, so now let's assume कि we are returning res.json in this format. Are we returning a promise? ये dot then is it returning a promise? So to use this res.json wala data, do we have to apply one more dot then to fix that promise, to use that promise? इसी वजह से we write one more dot then, and finally here we can simply use our data. Clear? Clear? Why do we write two dot then? And you just have to now remember this only. This will be the only use of promise so far that you are going to use overall. Promise के बाद में चल के when you're creating complex system, you'll use it. But overall in daily to daily basis, this is what promises will get in. take तो fetch पे वापस आते हैं. What we have done here is we are converting res.json, फिर res को we are assigning that value, and finally we are returning this res, right? So this thing is gonna return you a promise, this dot then, and finally हम वो dot then को accept कर रहे हैं and we are printing. Clear है? This thing is clear, everyone? Everyone, सबको clear है? So now if I go in here ना, you guys will see that I have fetched the data. हमें data मिल गया from database. Clear? Everyone, how to fetch data? Yeah, I'll give you guys a break, but just tell me if this is clear or not. This thing is clear, everyone? Take, so ठीक है. Now we'll learn कि like again now you are getting this data array, right? Abhi the old process is gonna run, nothing new, right? Take this data, run a for each or map on it, and just use it, right? So have a break of 4 minutes, and then after that I'll do a quick recap and we'll move on with fetch. Take, so guys, be back by 8, everyone. Right, everyone back. Tick. So yeah. I hope now fetch is clear okay, how you can fetch data, right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna fetch some data again. So let's create another file and Udar will fetch the data. So let's go and write index.html. Now I'm gonna create a script, and in here we'll write everything, right? So let's dispose it. Let's run another file, and यहाँ पे we'll inspect. So now you guys remember that for using data and showing it on our document, what we used to do is we used to create a dummy data, right? As you guys might have used in your projection. Yaad hai? This dummy data creation, and then we did array dot for each on this, and then we created and all बाकी सारी चीजें, right? So now this thing has no need as of now. Abhi kya ho raha hai? Now we can fetch data from databases. But the issue is that we don't have any dedicated database जो कि हमने create किया. So what we do is we take help from internet and we use some free fake databases that they have. Take one of these databases is called Fake Store API, and all we have to do is we have to visit it and we have to use the link. Right? So again, let's say कि मुझे ये वाला API fetch करना है. I'll just copy this URL and I'll go back in here. I'll write 3 statements, right? I'll write a fetch here. I'll paste the URL. Fine. I'll paste the URL, but URL should be in what format? URL should be in what format? String, right? So what I'll do is I'll make this thing a string. So this fetch is gonna return you a promise. You're gonna get a promise in return. So how do we deal with it? If it's resolved, we have to go with dot then. In here, we'll accept a function raise, but we can't directly use this response, directly use that data. It's in JSON format. So we use some inbuilt function, which is called res.json. So we basically fix this. We give res a value of res.json. We say कि now this is your new value. This is a promise. So what we do is return कर देंगे res. Take, so now this dot then is again gonna return a promise. To use it, we're gonna go and do dot then here. We'll run function. Let's put again accept this, and we can do a console dot log res. Right? So if I go back and if I run this file, let's run this file. I open inspect. I'm printing this array which has these data. Clear? Clear? Res response here resolve. Like this res means response actually. But again, guys, the name can be anything. It's based on you. You can write it as E, right? E, ELE, anything, right? But yeah, the name can be anything. That's the point. But industry standard में क्या करते हैं? We rather go for res because res stands for response. So whatever we are getting as a response from that promise, we use. Clear? Clear? So fetch is easy. Fetch is easy. Fetch is easy. Right? So again, here's a link. Right? ये तो रहा for products. This is for categories. So let's say if I take this URL and if I paste it here, you'll see it gives me category. So what you guys have to do is, I'll share this URL with you guys. Write those 3 lines of fetch, right? Fetch के वो 3 line लिखो and share the code with me and let me know if you're able to get the data on your console or not. Right? I've shared the URL, guys. Everyone, please do this. Do a fetch, do twice dot then, convert it into JSON and print your data. Nothing else. इसमें resolve या reject नहीं आएगा. देखो, the URLs resolve and reject based on themselves only. So we don't have to specifically think of that case. But yeah, if you want, you can write a dot catch. That's on you, right? But it's not usually necessary. Because websites often deal it in backend, right? You can just go with dot then. If your URL is correct, your code is. Take guys, take 2 minutes and try to do that. Pawan, this is correct. I hope you are able to get the data, मिल रहा है data. Are you getting this data in your console? देख URL कॉपी नहीं हो रहा है, URL क्लिक हो रहा है. Can you click on the URL at least? So click करो and वहां से जाके URL कॉपी कर लो. Everyone, can you guys able to do it? हो रहा है data. Okay, all right. I can see that many of you guys can do it. Right? So easy है ना? All you have to do is you have to write a fetch keyword. This keyword takes a parameter which is your URL and you have to just write two dot text. Right? Promise finally आके इसी चीज में conclude हो जाता है आपके लिए for now. Right? You won't be using that promise a lot rather than this. Just it's there to explain कि how fetch का phenomena काम करता है. Clear? Clear? Line number 18, we are just giving res a new value of res.json, right? So it's just like this, what we used to do, str equals to str plus r. So what's this gonna do? It's gonna take string, uski initial position mein, it's gonna add a new thing, right? So we're just updating the res ka value with its current value, nothing else. Like, why can't be returned directly? It can be returned directly, but I'm not sure why it's not working here. Like, although it can be returned directly, I'm pretty sure about that. So I'm not sure if let me run this table. Go in here and console me. If I directly do a res.json rather than doing this, uh, I'm still getting it, right? So it's based on use case. Sometimes what happens, the code starts to run very quickly, so it might be an issue. But again, overall, it won't be an issue. You can just directly return a response. That's fine. ठीक, बाकी जैसे वैसे ही प्रिंट होगा exactly yes. Clear? Is everyone able to do it? ठीक. Okay. Okay. So now we are getting this res. If I go and let's do one thing, let's do a placeholder one, right? This has a much better things that we can iterate over. So let's open this thing and यहाँ पे we are gonna paste that. Take so yeah, we're getting the array in return, these data, right? Let's say if I go here and if I do console dot log of res, will I be able to access it? Or am I getting res is not defined? Not defined? Makes sense actually, right? Right? Why? Because scoping is there, right? We can't access res outside of this dot then just take. So now how am I going to use this array that we are getting in return to do a for each on? How can I do that? Store function in function variable. ठीक है. So now what we are gonna basically do is we are gonna modularize our code. हम क्या करेंगे? We're gonna write a function which is gonna be called get data, right? And in this get data function, I'm gonna take this fetch and I'm gonna paste it here. And as soon as the website loads, I'm gonna write get data and I'm gonna call this function, right? So this is here. Now we can we make this function a bit more dynamic? What do you guys think? Can we make it a bit more dynamic? Okay, I'll show you the API and you guys tell me what happens here, right? So ये रहा एक API, right? And it has multiple things, right? You can get all products. Let's say if you're clicking on a single product, you can see a single product. Let's say if you want a limit result, you can limit result, you can sort result, you can get all categories. So there are multiple different fetch requests. Yes, in a single database, we can do multiple different fetch requests. Yes or no? Right? तो क्या हमें हर एक रिक्वेस्ट के लिए we have to go and write this function again and again? Or can I just pass a URL in here? And what I can do is rather than pasting something in here, I can just make this as URL. And whenever I'm calling this function with a certain URL, I can make it dynamic. Now I can go and write this get data function again, but for different URLs, can I do that? हो सकता है. Yes, can I write this one here? Right? So I'm gonna get iska data and I don't even have to write fetch data twice. Right? So this is modularization. We have to start thinking in this format. ठीक, अब start कर देना है इस format में सोचो. Right? Fine. We are getting the res wala array. Next step is basically showing that data on DOM. Right? हमें DOM पे वो data दिखाना है. Everyone. So what we are gonna do is we're gonna create a function which is called show data. Right? ये रहा आपका show data function and it accepts an array. So can I just call this show data here with array as a response? कर सकता हूँ. Is this fine? Right? So if I go and do a console dot log array here, what am I gonna get? I'm just gonna get this, right? And can I apply my usual or our usual method of array dot for each, right? And इसके अंदर we can write a function, this thing accepts element in index, and यहाँ पे I can just go and create things. Right? So एक second, let me just console something and let's see what we are getting here. So we're getting category, we are getting title, right? So हमें title पे मिल रहा है. So let's do one thing. I'll create let box equals to, and we're gonna create document dot create element, and this will be a div. Take, we have to create a title. So title, what should we do now? Can you explain line number 26? 26, this one. So as soon as we are getting this res data, na, हम क्या कर रहे हैं? We are calling the show data function. The show data function हम call कर रहे हैं with the data that we have received from our website. So now this array is gonna be this data array. ये जो data array है ना, this is gonna be nothing else. Clear? Clear? Tick. Okay. Now in here again, I'll go. Guys, is this not clear? Why am I calling show data? Can you write arrays there instead of array? Where? Here? Of course you can. Like argument का नाम कुछ भी होगा. Right? This is totally fine. It can be anything. Take, but we try to keep the name as if we can understand कि हाँ क्या use हो रहा है. So I'm keeping it as an array that so that we know कि we are having an array and we are running a for each on. Take, chalo. So let's get back here. We are gonna create a title. So I'm gonna write let h4 h3 equals to document dot create element, and this will be h3, and h3 dot inner html will be your element dot title. This again, I'll have to check the data what we're getting here. I think it's basic. So here in data, we have title and we have image. So let's print title and let's print image. So we're gonna print element dot title. Let image equals to document dot create element. Image के लिए कौन सा element होता है? img. And to apply source to it, what we do? Image dot src. Right? So we'll do a image dot src. Now in here, we're gonna give a value of element dot. Yeah, मैं फिर भूल गया. I'm just gonna give it element, and the property was image only, right? I thought it was img for some reason. So this will be image, right? Now I'll take the box and I'll append these two things. So first I'll append image and then I'll append the title. What will be the next step? Box में append हो गया. We have to append it on DOM, right? So DOM में, let's say I have a container div. So ID is container. What I can do is I can come here and I'll write dot container equals to document dot query selector, and here I'll write hash container. I'll take the container and I'll do a dot append on it and I'll append the box. Right? Direct body में हो सकता है, of course हो सकता है. Then फिर navbar बनाओगे तो कहाँ बनाओगे? Right? That's why it's better to create certain divisions properly. Although you can append it in body, that's fine. Right? So now we have images with their names. Images with their names, and we don't even have to write that big array with objects in it. Yes. Yes. So we are decreasing our task again by just writing this function. Is this function something that is very difficult to understand? कुछ मुश्किल है इसमें, right? तो जो हमने कल promises पढ़े थे ना, it was just there to understand कि ये fetch काम कैसे करता है, right? So now it is very clear कि yeah, this fetch is gonna return a promise. To deal with that promise, we write a dot then. This dot then is again gonna return a promise. Why? Because we are using dot JSON, जो कि एक promise return कर रहा है. That's why we'll have to write one more dot then. And finally, यहाँ पे we are taking the data. We are sending the data in a function which is called show data, and this is doing nothing but doing a for each on it, and now we are running. Right? So in like, I guess it's 15-16 lines of code we have applied. Media query कैसे add होगी? So we'll have to give this thing a CSS, right? Take, we have to use dot catch when we not found. Yeah, of course, of course. So you can apply a dot catch here, right? In case your promises fail, you can go for dot catch, right? So you can just console the whatever error you are getting. or you can alert your user with that error, but it's not a usual practice. ठीक, async await, नीतीश ये part है ES6 का, async await, right? तो it's just promises, but again थोड़ा सा syntax change होगा. I'll take it tomorrow. आज नहीं. ठीक ठीक चलो. All right. ठीक है. So I hope this is clear, right? Try catch is more simple, but try catch does not replaces dot then, right? Right? If you're coming from async await side, dot then will be replaced with await. कल बताऊंगा, छोड़ो आज I don't want to throw jargons at you guys so that you will confused. कल बताऊंगा आराम से. ठीक है. So इतना बात clear है कि how we're getting the data and we have appended it, right? बाकी CSS you guys can apply. I'll just apply a basic CSS, but I'm pretty sure कि आप लोग apply कर लोगे, right? So ठीक है. We have a container box and उसके अंदर we are appending multiple boxes. So I'm gonna apply a grid on container. Is that fine? Is that fine? Right? तो display हो जाएगा grid and grid template columns हो जाएगा repeat, and I have to repeat thrice with one fraction. But ये करने के लिए I'm gonna fix the width, and width will be 70% of the page with a margin auto. Margin auto क्या करेगा? What's margin auto gonna do? Is it gonna vertically center our div or horizontally? Horizontally, right? Horizontally center करें. Here we'll give a gap, let's say 25 pixel, and hash. I mean, you guys pretty much know कि images इतने बड़े थे, तो we are gonna have issue with images. तो rather we'll have to specifically visit the image, container के अंदर div के अंदर image, and we'll have to give them width of your parent. So just take the width of your parent. That's all, right? So abhi, if I visit this, yeah, so there's a delay with the API. So yeah, we are getting the data. Right, so okay, let's fix the width and let's give it a certain pixel. So let's say you are gonna be 80% and the height will be 200 pixel. I guess, I hope it's fine. Okay, that seems fine. Clear? So this is basically how we can create our boxes. All right, back to square one. जो पहले करते थे, we are just doing that, except for now we don't have to write data from our side. We can just create or fetch the data. Clear hai? Can we do this? Everyone? Right? Again, if you want to apply, what was that? Media query on it. Media query कैसे apply करते हैं? What's the syntax for it? You write @, you write media, right? Then you write all the screens. उसके बाद we add max and minimum width, but do we have to add a and? Right? So let's say यहाँ पे मैं max width लिखता हूँ 900 pixel and minimum width लिखता हूँ 400 pixel. Is this fine? Or is there any issue with it? Is there any syntactical issue? Like you can see a red here. Right? Do we have to apply and here, right? We have to tell कि हाँ, we are using further more properties after screen. उसके बाद, let's say if you want to decrease the template columns, so do I have to write this entire thing or just pick this container and just update this part? Just update that part. So we have to just pick the hash container, and in here we'll just update grid template columns, and now you'll repeat, but not thrice, you'll just repeat twice. Take, so now if I go in here and if I apply media query on it, take, so like as soon as it gets smaller, you guys see it is 2 columns per row, and just say if it's getting bigger than 900, right, or 900 at the end, so you'll see 3 columns is there. Clear? Clear? So that's easy. Okay, so again, a few more things, right? Now, the question comes, can we make this URL dynamic? Right? Why would we need things to be dynamic? Can anyone tell me that first? चीजें dynamic क्यों चाहिए? It reduce the code. ठीक है. ठीक है. I was hoping for more example. Let's say if you have data, इसमें you have men's के clothing, right? You have women's के clothing. You have child's के clothing, right? You might want to filter things. Maybe you want to sort things. Right? Right? तो क्या होता है when you visit a URL ना for these kind of things you have something which is called query, right? Query का मतलब क्या होता है? I'm pretty sure that you guys might have heard about, जैसे let's say if a URL is written, right? You might have seen a question mark there with a Q or something. Have you ever noticed it? Right? So basically these things are query. ये क्या होता है? We have a URL and we are asking that URL a question. Have you seen a query which is equals to men's shirt or something? Right? So now, do you guys have filters on your LMS? LMS पे आपके filter है? Right? So now once you try applying some filter na, watch the URL. You'll notice that there might be a question mark which asks URL some question ki, do you have something which is equivalent to this? Right? So let's go and visit Flipkart. I guess Flipkart pe we should have this feature. So let's say कि यहाँ पे I'm searching for laptops. Right? If I click on this, you see that Flipkart के आगे I have added a search and then I've added a question mark with a Q. And it has a equals of laptops. Right? So this thing is basically asking this URL a question. Do you have a thing which this user is searching, which has a name of laptops? Take, but we might miss, somebody might miss like the spelling and maybe write laptops. Take, so there is something which is called that, so it's suggesting that, but yeah, the mistakes might happen. So यहाँ पे what happens now? These many queries are there to fix that issue. Take again, let's take one thing at a time. Utna for now, let's not think about that much feature. Let's come back to our fake store API and let's see if we have that feature or not. Right? So do we have a feature limit result get in category? So if I click on get in category, right? Again, guys, documentation jaoge for every API, you might have different documentation. So documentation, I do recommend study it. Take, so I'm gonna find get product in specific category. So in this documentation, what it does is it fetches, you have to write the URL, then you'll write products, then you'll write category, and in that category, you'll write jewelry. If you want to just get jewelry, right? You guys remember कितने categories थे हमारे पास in fake store API? If you don't remember, let's go in categories. कहाँ गया category? Yeah. So if I click on show output, na, it's going to show the output of this fetch, right? So I'm going to click on show output. It has these 4 categories. It has electronics, it has jewelry, it has men's clothing and women's clothing. Let's do one thing. Let's pick this thing. Let's pick this thing and let's paste it here. Tick. So now we have every data which has category of jewelry in it. Yes or no? Right? Let's say if I pick something else, let's say if I'm picking electronics. Right? So agar yahan pe jaake, if I make this thing as this electronics. So now do I have every category which has electronics in? Right? So now what we are doing is we are basically taking the URL and in that URL, we are dynamically changing this data. Right? So based on that, let's say if I want to add a property, something like this, कि let's say this is our URL. By default, हम सारा data दिखा रहे हैं user को. Right? Just think about it. Just think about this application. Let's say I have a select tag here. Once this user clicks on the select tag, now we show the user these categories that we have on our website. We have electronics, jewelry, men's clothing, and women's clothing. If our user is clicking on jewelry, should we just show jewelry to our user? If he's clicking on men's clothing, should we just show men's clothing to the user? Yes or no? What do you guys think? ऐसा कुछ होना चाहिए property like that? So can we apply it in this code? In this, कहाँ लिखा है? Yeah, in this code that we have written, can we apply it? We have our URL, we are making fetch. We have our URL. Can somehow we make this URL dynamic? Bipin, correct? Right? So of course you guys can apply filter and all, but filter के terms में मत सोचो. For now, although filter will be much more optimized way, but filter के terms में मत सोचो. Think in terms of this query, right? Let's say if I update this URL, I'll update it. I'll give you guys 1 minute. Just think about it. And think ki can I use template literals here? Socho. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Okay. So now we basically have to add a select tag for our users, right? So let's go and add a select tag, right? So, and we'll further discuss about it. So select tag has option, right? And it has categories, and the options are let me just copy the options. जो option थे हमारे पास, where are the options? These four, right? Don't want to make spelling mistakes, so that's why I'm copying it. यहाँ पे let's paste it. First option is electronics, so I'm just going to copy this 4 times. Take first option will be your electronics, so I'll put electronics here, and I'll put electronics in value. Take, then we have jewelry, so I'm going to take jewelry here, and I'm going to put it in value also, so value will have jewelry. Then I'm going to have men's clothing. I'm going to put men's clothing here, and I'm going to put a value with men's clothing in it. And then we have women's clothing, so I'm going to take this women's clothing and the value. Okay, sure. So now what does value means in option? जब आप option को click करोगे ना, तो you will do a option dot value to get this value. That's why we put value there, right? And let's post this above it, right? So now in here, in our web page, again, our web page, we have categories. Let's say if I'm clicking on this categories, we should print the categories at least. पहले तो first part will be that only, right? So let's create a function for this. Let's accept that select tag. So category select. This will be document.query selector. And so nothing is here. Can you guys hear me? Is my voice clear? Audible? सुन पा रहे हो सब? So might be an issue with your system. एक बार try, right? And we're gonna write select tag here, right? Now we have to apply event on it. So what's the event for select tag? Was it change? Was it change? Right? So we have category select, and we're adding an event listener, which was change, right? And I can write a handle category change function, right? So let's go and write a function which is called handle category change. And what this function accepts is कुछ accept नहीं करता है. We're just gonna get this category. So we're gonna let value equals to category select dot. एक बार पहले category select print करते हैं because I'm sure you guys have already forgotten value क्या है. ठीक, तो चलो value print करते हैं. Let's go and see what we are actually printing जब हम कुछ select कर. So let's say if I'm clicking on electronics, I'm getting वो electronics वाला select tag, right? So if I do document value dot target, what am I gonna get? Am I gonna get the specific option? Specific option मिलेगा या नहीं मिलेगा? If I click on jewelry, oh, am I getting undefined? So I guess value will work directly. Take, so if I click on jewelry, yeah, we're getting jewelry. If I click on women's clothing, we're getting that. Take, so we'll just go and write dot value. Take, so now we'll get the whatever value we are passing in that select tag. ठीक, उसके बाद what will be the next step? Value select हो गई. Now do we have to update the value that we are getting? Right? Right? So let's have the link. Let URL equals to the URL that we have here. Right? There's a minor tweak in the URL. URL में थोड़ा सा minor tweak है. What is it? It's product slash category slash jewelry. Right? So let's copy this and let's paste it. Right? But is it static or is it dynamic? Is this URL static or dynamic? It's static. It only searches for jewelry. So हम क्या करेंगे? We'll make it dynamic by writing literals on it. Right? And we'll add a template here. हम क्या करेंगे? We'll update this thing with what? Value. Fine. Fine. And we're gonna run a get data function with this new URL. Clear है क्या? Clear है क्या? राइट तो अभी क्या होगा हमने क्या किया हमने नया यूआरएल अपडेट कर दिया एंड वी आर जस्ट सेंडिंग दैट यूआरएल इन दिस गेट डेटा अगेन नाउ दिस गेट डेटा विल फेच डेटा फ्रॉम द न्यू यूआरएल एंड इट्स गोना रन योर शो डेटा फंक्शन एक जो इश्यू होगा दैट इज दैट इट हैज ऑलरेडी अपेंडेड सम डेटा तो डू वी हैव टू क्लियर दैट अपेंडेड डेटा right? So what we'll do is we'll pick the container and we'll pick the inner HTML and we'll make it null, right? Let's go and see if it works or not. So if we go back to our platform, if I click on electronics, so yeah, there's a bit delay in fetch, right? Fetch में थोड़ा सा delay है. So are we just getting all the electronic products? If I click on men's clothing, right, again there will be a delay. So after that delay, do we have a men's clothing section? Right? If I have women's clothing, I'm just gonna get women's clothing in a bit. Clear? So how can we use query parameters to fix it? Shivam, answer karunga, just give me a second. So how can we use query parameters to update our stuff? Is that clear? Everyone? And is fetch way more easy than you guys expected? डर लग रहा था fetch से, but you can see that how easy it is, right? It's just application of promise जो कि आप already जान. ठीक. अच्छा. अभी शिवम को क्वेश्चन है कि why are we using inner HTML rather than inner text? So inner HTML basically हर एक HTML को access करेगा, right? तो by default हमने container में we have pasted these things, we have attached these things. तो we have to clear them. तो हम inner HTML को clear कर रहे हैं. If we just do inner text का clearing ना, तो we'll not be clearing these images. Will we be? Images तो text नहीं है, right? So that's why rather than using inner text, we use inner HTML. तो हम आगे भी URL का यूज करके वेब बना. Yes, of course. You are just gonna do these only. चाहे आप React यूज करो, चाहे कुछ भी यूज करो. From now onwards, if you wanna fetch data from database, we'll use fetch. That's all. And ये 3-4 lines ही होंगे that you have to write. Nothing else. Take, can we do yeah, of course. Like that's on you. You can go for null or you can go for empty string. Both works. Select not understand. Select is your HTML tag which has options in it. अभी क्या होता है, अभी if I click on that option, have attached a event in it which is change, and I'm running a function which is called handle category. In this, what I'm doing is I'm just getting that select and I'm using a dot value. That's all. Can we fetch any API? Of course you can. What does value means in option? When you're clicking on that option, you'll do a dot value. So to get the value, you have to add a value. That's what it is. Can we fetch any API? Yeah, of course. So you can go and try fake store API. You can go and try JSON placeholder. I have multiple different APIs. I'll give you guys API, right? How to fetch API of Flipkart? You can't. Flipkart ka API is subscription based. So up until you want to shell out $4 or $5 per search, you can't use Flipkart ka API. So like some databases are protected, right? Of course, सारी चीजें free में रहेंगी तो everyone can create Flipkart API, right? For now, I won't recommend कि go and pay it. अभी के लिए don't recommend, but you can go in AWS and there you will find links जहाँ पे maybe you can ask for subscription amount. ठीक, handle category one more time. अच्छा, select tag कितनों को समझ नहीं आया? I think there are multiple people जो have forgotten about select tag. Okay. ठीक है, चलो तो like this is select tag. यहाँ पे you have option, right? And in option you give some value which you can accept later, right? तो HTML part clear है for select, HTML part at least, right? Now the next step is to get the select and to apply a event listener on. Now why have we applied change rather than click? Because click में क्या होता है, every time the function prints exact same return, right? If I add a click on button, every time it's just gonna get clicked. Will the value change in a button? Will the value change? No. But in option, you have multiple different values. So rather than going for click, we go for a change. When the options change, right? When the option change. So if it changes from electronics to men's clothing, will show men's clothing, right? So that's why we have applied dot change, right? And uske baad we are calling a handle category change. Now we're running this function, and what this function does is it takes the value of this category, right? So this select tag ka value. So if you have clicked on this, you'll get this value. If you have clicked on this, you'll get that value. I'm getting that value and I'm taking the URL, and in this URL, I'm dynamically typing my value. And in line number 96, I'm calling this get data function with the new URL that we have just created dynamically. Clear? And we're calling the new URL. We're getting the new data. We're running the show data again. We're clearing the old data and we're mapping over new data. Clear? Clear? Search query कैसे लगाएं? Although we'll be discussing it in next session, but if you want to apply it, it's just going to be something like this. आपको क्या करना है? You just have to accept the value from an input box rather than a select tag. Once you accept the value, just apply that value here, right? Most dynamic parameters are going to work just like this. This is all that you have to do. Clear? Now you can go for input, you can go for select. That's all. Clear, guys? How you can create a structure like this? Take. So there's one more small topic that we have to start, which is ES62. It won't take much time, 10 minutes only. Take. So can we promises mainly used to prevent callback again and again. Yeah, it's one of the reason that promises were introduced to prevent callback help, because we write nested functions. Take. So yeah, let's do the topic. It's not very theoretically different. It's just syntax. I'll just introduce one small thing, right? Pura A6 नहीं पढ़ाऊंगा, just one small thing, nothing. Take. So let's just do that. Take. Tomorrow I have to tell you guys about arrow functions, at least. Take. Neither you won't be able to solve your assignment and all. It won't take time, trust me. Take. And it's not something that is very hard. Take. चल, बस छोटी सी चीजें यहाँ पे देख, ध्यान दो. ध्यान दे रहे हो कि नहीं दे रहे हो? सब भागने लगे हो? ध्यान है, ठीक है। चलो चलो, सो फंक्शन लिखने का दो तरीका होता है, right? We can write function with name initially, and we can write function like this also, can we not? लिख सकते हैं, right? So there's this syntax which is called ES6. Anyone aware about ES6 or ES at all? ES की full form भी पता है किसी को? Anyone knows about full form of ES? What is it? It's basically your ECMA script, right? ECMA script. So the thing was that multiple different browsers were using JavaScript only because it was way much optimized, right? So almost most of the browser, be it Mozilla Firefox, be it your Chrome, be it your Safari, be it your Edge and all, they use JavaScript ka engine only, right? So to prevent issues on different engine, हम क्या करते हैं? We define a set of rule and JavaScript follows that rule so that we don't, मतलब एक website does something else with code and another website does something else with code, ऐसा कुछ नहीं होना चाहिए, right? So we have defined a standard set of rule. If you guys have ever heard about SI units, सुने हैं क्या? SI unit standard, ये यहाँ पे physics chemistry वाले हैं ही नहीं क्या? Of course, right? हमने सुने हैं, right? You have heard about kilometers and like centimeters and all, right? So there are some standard units जो कि overall follow होते हैं. Of course, you can use different units also, but when you're going for standard level, you go for those standard units, right? तो उसी तरीके से there are these standard scripts that we follow for JavaScript. Now, in May, there are different versions. The last version was ES5, right? उसके बाद we had another version which was called ES6. In this, we created some updates in JavaScript. Right? One of those updates was writing functions. Right? Writing functions. So they created a method by which you can write functions more easily. Right? But function की property change नहीं होते. How function work, that does not change. Just the syntax changes. Right? How does that change? Let's say if I want to create this function, all I have to do is I have to write let, I have to write the name, and I'll write this. Rather than going for function and all, I have to just write parentheses. I have to write an arrow and this. That's all. So I'm preventing myself from writing this entire word, right? And in coders world, this thing prevents a lot of things, right? काफी ज़्यादा code लिखने से बचाता है. That's all. Nothing else, nothing new, right? So now let's say if I write a return 1 plus 2, how do we call normal functions? Just write the name and write a parenthesis. Exactly what you are going to do here. Name likho and just call it. Nothing new. Tick. So if I go back in here and if I inspect it, if I go for this, let me make it full screen. Be full screen. ठीक है, तो we'll have to do a console of this. So let's do a console.log of, right? So we're writing 3, but arrow functions ना चीजें और small करते हैं. Let's say you don't have to write any if else condition, you don't have to write any condition here. You can complete this thing in one line only. You don't have to write this parenthesis also. You don't have to write return also. You just have to write 1 plus 2 and it will print. ठीक, so this is how arrow function का syntax is, and this is how it saves you guys some time. Clear? Clear? Right? बस यही है syntax, nothing else. Right? So again, you can do conditional rendering here. Let's say if the flag is false, right? And if the flag is false, the question statement is if flag is false, right? Print flag down, else print flag up. Take, so now I can go here and I can write a condition, right? So I can say if flag is true, I can print, or rather I can just return directly. I hope we can write it. I can return flag up, else I'll return flag down, right? The flag is false. We are printing flag down. If we go and update the flag with true, it will print flag. Okay, so if we want to write function name, not assigning variable, and we write data load, no, you can't. You'll have to assign it in a variable format. Take this, you'll have to do, right? So guys, अभी fetch थोड़ा और छोटा नहीं हो गया? URL dot then, rather than writing this entire anonymous function, can we not convert it into arrow function? All you have to do is you have to write bracket this, ये लो और छोटा हो गया, right? We can make it even more smaller. यहाँ पे I'll write res.json, ठीक, and यहाँ पे I'll do dot then, and in here I might need to call some functions, so I'll call those functions in, right? To show data or something with the res, right? So res I'll pass here, res I'll pass here. Clear है? So this is just syntax update, nothing new. ठीक, arrow function का syntax sense बनाता है, and is it somewhat at least saving time? At least function वाला word नहीं लिखना पड़ता. Return is not needed in first thing. देखो, return is not needed if you just have to write a single line, right? But let's say कि if you have to write a for loop in this function also, or you have to write a certain condition, in that case you'll have to create a block, right? And as soon as आपने block create कर दिया ना, let's say if I have to run a for loop here, let I equals to 0 and I is less than 10, and I'll do I plus plus, and here nothing. So now in this case I'll have to write return statement. Take return, and this will be take. So this is what we have to do actually, right? But if you don't have any code to write in between, you can just directly write that. Clear है? Clear है? So arrow function was not the only thing that got updated in ES6. There are few more properties. आज नहीं, कल बात करेंगे उनके बारे में. ठीक है? ठीक है? Line number 43 where write return 43. देखो तो what I said, na, if you just have to return one statement, you can just go and directly write like this. You don't have to write return statement. But if you have to write some code in it, then you will have to write return statement. Clear? Take this is, क्या बोलते हैं इसको guys? Question mark and semicolon. Ternary operator, right? So go find it in notes. या फिर like it's a if else condition. So if this condition is true, we'll print this, else we'll print the later condition. ठीक है? Although I have updated the notes with few more ES6 के things like spread and all, तो एक बार just go through it. Although I'll cover it in next lecture. ठीक, तो again a TLDR, if you think कि आज का notes थोड़ा बड़ा है, it's there just to be big. Next session वाला notes, it's going to be very small क्योंकि next session में we're just going to use these things only which we have learned today and we'll apply things to it. जैसे last session में we learned about Tom and then we applied sort and all, उसी तरीके से today we have learned about fetch and tomorrow we'll apply things on fetch, nothing. Clear? तो कल we'll talk more about ES6. ठीक है, तो आई होप अभी प्रोमिसेस से डर नहीं लग रहा होगा.